Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 4 of the P-base build. At the end of episode 3 we were faced with the uncomfortable reality that the neck had bowed, and I said I was going to go away and have a think about how I was going to address this. What I've decided is that I'm going to push on with this neck blank for a couple of reasons. Firstly, worst case scenario is I make another neck. Isn't a real problem, won't really cost a huge amount of money. Secondly, I think this would be a really good opportunity to experiment with the bent neck that we've got to see if there are techniques we can use to bring it back. So I've been monitoring this neck now for a couple of days and it doesn't seem to have moved anymore, so I think that gives us a solid footing to try and get this thing sorted out. So I'm going to drop you down on the bench and I think it's time to break out some more dodgy diagrams to explain exactly how I'm going to go about this. Okay, so this is what we're faced with. If we use a level as a straight edge and then measure the gap at the centre of the neck when the level is on the heel and the headstock, the gap is 2.8 millimeters. Now that might not sound like a huge amount, but in this context it would probably make the base unplayable. It would definitely mean that I wouldn't be able to level the frets properly when we get to that stage. So we need to do something about it. However, if we measure with a straight edge from the nut to the heel, it's only bowed 1.4 millimeters. So a lot of the bow can be accounted for with the area of the headstock. Now that's not really a problem, because if you think, a Les Paul or a similar guitar, that headstock goes back 17 degrees. So effectively what happens past the nut isn't really that important. So what I propose to do is this. So I've drawn this slightly differently because the warp on the top two drawings is wildly exaggerated and this is a little bit more accurate to what's going on with the neck. So my plan is, basically, I'm going to plane down the headstock area and take out most of the bow that way. I might have to do a little bit of planing on the heel, but this neck blank is a little bit over thickness. So I've got about 0.5, 0.6 of a millimetre to play with at the heel. At the headstock, however, at the moment, it's 21 millimetres thick. It only needs to be 13 millimetres. So what I'm going to do is plane down, remove the excess material from the bottom, and then I can use that as the reference to mark out the face of the headstock. Hopefully that will get rid of virtually all of the bow. On the back it doesn't really matter if it doesn't, because realistically we need from the start of the headstock to the heel area to be on the same plane. The rest of it is going to be carved away into a taper. So we can fix the bow on the back of the neck that way. There might still be a bit of a bow on the top of the neck. So once I've got this properly flattened down, I will make sure I'm holding it dead flat on the bench, and then I can skim off the top of the neck to remove that bow. That might mean that I have to deepen the truss rod channel in the middle a little bit, but that's not a big deal. We can do that very easily. If having done this, the neck is a little bit under thickness, it's not a massive problem. All it will mean is that I'll make the fretboard slightly thicker to compensate for that. So we'll end up with the same thickness of neck. Once I've got it to the stage where I think it's flat and I think it's all good, I'm then going to take it into the house for a few days and I'm going to see how it acclimatises to that. If that change in temperature introduces more movement into the neck, I think that's probably a good time to say enough's enough and we'll start work on the new neck. If after a couple of days in the house it hasn't moved any further, I will then commence work on it again and move it along. And if it goes bad after that point, well, that's on me. But I think this is a useful experiment, so I'm willing to take that risk. Okay, so I'm just going to start planing away at this headstock area and see if we can get that sorted out. I've took a couple of test passes and thankfully the grain is running in this direction, so I'm able to plane this quite nicely. Okay, so I've just spent 10 minutes with the plane. I've taken most of the meat out from the headstock, probably planing to about there on the neck. And I've also kind of taken a little bit off the heel. But both the headstock and the heel are still within tolerance. So they're still over the measurement that I want of the 21 millimeters. But what I've managed to do is I've got the bow down measured from the overall length, heel to headstock. I've got that bow down from 2.8 to 1.4 millimeters. That is irrelevant, but the relevant measurement is from the nut to the heel. I've got that down to 0.6 of a mil. So I think that's within tolerance. So what that leads me to do now is to just address the crown that is going to be left on the top surface. Okay, so that's plain top and bottom now. You might have seen I just stuck a little piece of veneer underneath the middle of the neck while I was planing, just to stop it deflecting that kind of half a mil that's in there, which means that I should be planing the top fairly straight. And that's a lot straighter. It's not absolutely spot on perfect, but it's very, very close. We're kind of talking half a millimeter now, and there's a couple of things there. I've yet to glue the fretboard on, and when I glue the fretboard on, I'm going to do it on the bench, and I'm going to clamp the whole lot to the bench, which I know is straight. So hopefully that will pull that last little bit of bow out, and the thickness of the fretboard will kind of hold it in place. The beauty of this is a back bow and this is a base, so we're going to be putting 4 really heavy strings on this, which is naturally going to pull the headstock forward a little bit. So I think we're kind of getting to where we need to be with this. I think you can see just with it sitting on the bench, it's a lot straighter than it was. So the next thing is to refit the truss rod and just see where we're going with that. Okay, so this rod should be straight, and it's a little bit proud, but it's not much. It's probably about half a mil, if that. So rather than breaking the power router out again, because that would mean I'd have to set a load of guides and stuff up to make this work, I'm just going to get a little hand router on the job. This is more than good enough to take out the kind of little bit of material that we need. So I'm going to set this up for the depth of the heel, because that should be spot on still. And I'm just going to check how much that would actually be taking a really big cut from the middle. So I'm just going to reset that so it's slightly above that level. And then just start taking some of the material out the bottom. Okay, with that all done, I'm now going to get this neck into the warm and leave it for another couple of days just to see how it responds to that. Like I say, if there's any further issues, we'll just get rid of it. Otherwise, we'll crack on. Okay, with that done, we can drop back onto the 2 jobs that I thought I was going to be doing this episode, and they are cutting the neck pocket and making a scratch plate. Okay, so I'm set up now for this scratch plate, and the first thing I've done is I've stuck the template to the back of the scratch plate material. I'm going to run it around the bandsaw just to get rid of the bulk of the waste, and then the reason I've put this on the back is that once I've finished routing the shape on the table router, I can then cut the chamfer around the top edge of this pickguard without having to take it off the template, so I don't have to worry about realigning it or anything. Okay, so first step, get it onto the bandsaw. Okay, so that's the scratch plate off the router. Done a little bit of cleaning up around the edges. Very happy with it so far. It's looking really, really nice. It's still got one of the plies of film on the top, so that's why it's looking a little bit raggy in some of the edges. That'll all clean up as soon as we take that film off. Obviously I want to leave that on as long as possible to protect it. So next it's a case of drilling out all the holes for the various screws and controls and stuff that need to go into this pickguard. So I'm going to leave it on the template to do this, and you'll notice there's holes in the template for all the screws and everything else, but they're all the same size, which might not make a lot of sense. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a little transfer punch, and all these holes have been drilled specifically to fit this transfer punch, and all I do is put it in the hole, give it a little bit of a tap for all of the holes, and that's going to leave a little dimple on the other side, which I can use to either drill a pilot hole or drill the actual holes that I need for everything to go through. Okay, with that done, I can take it off the template now. Carefully. Don't know how well you can see that, but you might just catch in the light the little dimples left by the transfer punch. There they are. Okay, so the next step is, I know that all the screw holes around the perimeter are going to be the same size, but that's not the same for the controls. So what I'm going to do is mark out next to them what the drill needs to be, which leaves nothing else but to get it on the drill press and get them all drilled out. And there it is, the completed scratch plate. I have to say I'm really pleased with that. There's a little bit of tickling up to do around the edges just with a block and some fine sandpaper just to get the finish that I want, but other than that, that's gone really, really well. So later on in this episode I'm going to actually install everything onto this scratch plate and just make sure that it fits into the body, but I've got one more job to do before we get to that stage, and that is to put the neck pocket into the body itself. Now the next bit I wanted to get done for this video before we can move on is to cut the neck pocket. And to do that I've made a custom neck pocket template. I've done this by casting the heel of the neck that I'm hopefully going to be using on this build in car body filler into an oversized gap. I'm not going to go through the process too much in this video. I covered it in great depth on the previous build, so I'll put a link up there to that video so you can check that out if you're interested to see how I did this. But it does give an absolutely perfect fit for the neck that you've made. Okay, so basically the routine with this is we need to find the position that it needs to go. We need to mark out where we want to cut out. We take the waste out as normal on the drill press with a force and a bit, and then we'll just use the router around this edge to clean it all out and give us an absolutely spot on neck pocket. Okay, so to position this neck pocket is relatively straightforward. I've got my centre line marked in, I've got my centre line on my template, and it's marked down onto the end so I can position that accurately. And it's just a case of measuring back from the edge of the body to the correct distance, which is 3 7/8 of an inch, making a mark, lining your centre lines up, and this edge of the template against the mark that you've just put on. And that will give you your perfectly positioned neck pocket. Okay, with that hogged out, it's time to attach the template in the time-honoured fashion and get some routing done. Okay, now we have the neck pocket done. There's a bit of an inconsistency with what's shown on the drawing and what we've actually ended up with here. Basically, on the drawing it shows from here on outwards is flush with the side of the neck pocket, so there shouldn't be any of this material there. I'd say we've probably got about 1/8 of an inch. So my templates were made pretty accurately to the plan, so I think there's an inconsistency between what's shown on the plan for the body and what's shown on the plan for the neck. So I've got a little bit of remedial work to do there, but all it is a case of probably get that on the spindle sander and just sand that little bit of material away. The other thing I need to do now is I can get my round over bit back in and finish off these round overs into the neck pocket. But all in all, I'm happy with that. It's gone quite nicely. But with that done, we've very much got a P-base body now. Okay, with the neck pocket done, we're at the point where I can actually start to do my first mock-up now. So what I'm going to do is break out the pickguard again, all the controls that are going to go onto it, put all that together, put the neck in position, put the pickguard on, and just make sure that everything's kind of lining up as it should. Yeah, everything's just very loosely stuck into position there, but it all seems to fit really, really nicely. So far so good. Doesn't look to be any kind of rework needed there to make it fit up properly. Excellent. Okay, so I think that's a really good place to end this episode now. It might not seem like we've got a huge amount done, but it's these little bits and pieces jobs that really push a project forward when you get them out of the way. I'll be back very soon when I'll pick up work again on the neck. Hopefully we'll be able to move forward with that one and won't have to make a new one. Until that time, like if you've liked, subscribe if you haven't already, leave me a comment down below. I'm always happy to answer anything you've got to ask me, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.